I went with this question of why is that we create and listen to music, because think about it, how often do we listen to music in our daily lives? Like in a week, how many minutes or hours do you spend? And really, what reason do you? You might. So that's what I was hoping to find out here. So let's begin with a brief overview. Music dates back to prehistoric times. You see some ancient bone flutes here. We're talking even before Homo sapiens came into existence, there was music. So in today's world, you got musicians are looked up to. I use the term musicians loosely, trust me, I don't know how popular it is. So, and when it comes to, and of course people oftentimes act upon the message in music. Well, think about it. How often do you hear a song that might express like political views or social views, and then people end up sort of reflecting those views fairly often? And finally, I think a beautiful quote by Napoleon that pretty much sums up my point here. So, let's begin with why do we listen? When you're just sitting around passively listening to music, well, here's, God, I already lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. All right. So,
doing fine.
In essence, I just interviewed people for this is more abstract of a concept of like how people are feeling when they listen to music. So, people use it as a form of self-expression because, like I said, it might contain political views, social views, or there's a variety of things, really. And there's, of course, the stimulation of thoughts and emotion, once again, relates back to the whole self-expression thing. So then finally, there's the simple, quite vague concept of just gaining enjoyment out of listening to music. I've asked people if they could describe how it was that they felt more specifically when they were listening, but at the end of the day, no one really could. It was like just, all you could say was, well, I like it, and that's about it. I can explain what's that later as to why that is. So, then of course, for people who actually like sing or play musical instruments, I also interviewed them. So, why is that they practice? You get a goal to accomplish, you want to get better at what you're doing and improve. And also, if you do it successfully, it creates a similar feeling that you get when you listen to music, which is very vague, once again. Just all you can describe it as a good feeling. And so why does one perform music? That's pretty much your end goal from practicing. You practice so you can get to the performance, do well. So, you'll gain, people, of course, get different things out of performances, because if you're doing a solo, if you let someone who likes to be the center of attention, of course, that's kind of going to be your thing. You're going to get kind of some rewards personally from that. And then, of course, you have some people who prefer to be in groups, and they like the idea of being part of like something greater, I guess, than themselves. So, opportunity to show off, it's all actually pretty basic. So, now, enough of the abstract stuff, it's time for some science stuff. I love that image. So, you got the frequency and amplitude of brain waves are altered by music. That's, simply put, that means music just alters the way your brain is like acting in general. So, people oftentimes say that music like helps them to learn. Well, yes and no. Typically you want the slower tempo music, but end of the day, yes, it does work. More specifically, it's 60 beats per minute music. Now, finally, dopamine. My favorite chemical here, because with this, whenever you're enjoying something, that's what your brain is producing. And like heck, there's a lot of things that this can be referenced to. If you're doing a stunt, your brain's producing dopamine. If you're eating something you enjoy, your brain produces dopamine. And in the case of music, that's what it's doing. It's producing good old dopamine. Now, and of course, one thing that is quite curious here is that many people can be, well, brought into a sort of trance-like state in which their body might start moving, actually, without, more or less engaging in involuntary movements while they're listening to music. Also, music decreases the amount of cortisol in the brain, so they're less stressed. So, in terms of how it affects the body instead of the brain, So, heart rate and blood pressure can increase or decrease because when you're dealing with music with a slower tempo, your heart rate and blood pressure goes down with that, and it goes up if it's music with faster tempo. Why is kind of a curious thing, but right. So, also people who suffer from migraines and headaches, it actually serves as a sort of treatment. And well, for people who suffer from insomnia, it also helps to aid them in sleeping. And finally, you also, interestingly enough, I suppose you could say someone who listens to music frequently is less likely to be sick than, well, to get sick compared to someone who doesn't, because it strengthens the immune system here. Now, it's debate. There's no real clear-cut answer as far as science is concerned as to why music has these effects. Now, you have, like, the first theory called the NAPS theory of music. NAPS is an acronym for a non-adaptive pleasure-seeking behavior. And that's, in essence, what drug use is, or when you consume large amounts of, like, sugar or fat. All of this is non-adaptive pleasure-seeking behavior. Because, in essence, your body is like the way it is, and you have certain substances or things that can, in essence, take advantage of that weren't exactly intentional, I guess. So, but once again, the whole idea of drug use is a good analogy here. But then there are also some explanations that people have attempted to say that maybe it's an evolutionary advantage here. I presume you all know enough about the theory of evolution from biology class, so in essence you have like the idea that it's a social adaptation. Perhaps like among ancient humans, it was used as a sort of, I apologize if I'm being blunt here, but it was used as a more or less a mating ritual. In essence, someone who was good at music would be more attractive. And then, of course, you have like people tend to gather in groups more, move more effectively when they're listening to music. So, and also since it does cause people to reduce the amount of cortisol in their brains, people are less stressed, less likely to come into conflict. So also, there's the idea that it could have been used in communications. Well, think about it like this. Armies have oftentimes used like drums, flutes, things like that to communicate information. You also have the idea that, well, think of like all these like stories, the epic tales such as like the Iliad and the Odyssey. All these would originally be told through music, helps one to remember it, so it helps to transmit information through it. And finally, there's the idea that it's a harmless pastime, because if you're sitting here having your brain produce dopamine listening to music, you no longer have to go out and like do skydiving or any other weird stuff that is going to that could risk you getting injured. People can be happy without killing themselves. So, makes sense. So, final answer as to why humans listen to and create music, no one knows. Okay, quite bluntly, there's like practically nothing. I realize you guys are probably just annoyed you had to listen through all this crap I just threw out in front of you.
So, and a bit of a lack of an answer, but I think it's pretty good. It's not really your fault.
Well, yeah, sorry, it's not my
Oh,
fault.
it's science's fault.
Pretty much. Well, yeah, that's just it. It has all these benefits to people. People feel happy when they listen to music. The brain's producing good old dopamine. It has less cortisol. All that good stuff. And then there's the more abstract stuff that I went over earlier. End of the day, no one knows why, though. The brain and the body, all that, no one knows why it has that response to music. So, and there's some references, blah, blah, blah. Okay.